So before I send this frame off for powder coat, setting it into my frame fixture, frame jig to set up the geometry for my next build. I'm going to build myself a new race bike using the geometry off of the 5 bike because I've been so happy with it. This is just a Chop Source frame jig kit. They sell you the different fixtures and stuff, like this stuff, and the stuff for the rear axle. And you buy tubing and then build to your dimensions for what you need. This morning I just added the legs to this thing so it can be freestanding and not have to tie up a lift or a bench. I need to make some ties to go between the legs so it's not so wobbly, but should make it a lot easier to work on. So I'll take you along through the journey of building a frame from completely scratch. So I'm going kind of an expensive way on this. I bought a salvaged Yamaha TTR 90 frame just for the neck. I'm going to use that on this build, but I'm going to take a bunch of measurements off of this so that I can build something to replicate this neck so I can use the bearings and not have to modify the fork stem to use the Yamaha triple trees. The bearing setup I'm running right now is okay, but it does tend to get kind of beat up and have to change the bearings once, maybe sometimes twice a year. This setup I should never have to mess with it. And then on the rear axle plates, I've been fabricating them up. I actually had somebody cut me a bunch of plates like this to save me the time, because I was literally just drilling some holes and then grinding the slot, which was pretty time consuming. And then I take a piece of this 2x3 square tubing and cut a length of it and square it up and then weld this plate to it, and that's what gives me this, which is what I use for my rear axle mounts. And I drill a hole in the end for the adjuster after I'm done fabricating the frame. So my next step is to cut this all apart and get it down to something I can use. You got that neck tube cut off the frame and all ground smooth. And I sandblasted all the paint off of it. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce the fork stop tab on it. Probably just add some more, another piece of material on the bottom here. Weld that on. I'll just use this, I think it's 3/16 steel. So I radiused the end of this piece of flat stock to match the neck tube. So I'm going to just tack that in place, and then I can trim this right to size to match the other one instead of trying to like mark it and trim it that way. Okay, so I got this extra piece of steel welded in place so I can trim it down to size, then finish welding it after. So I finished welding that reinforcement in there, then did the final grinding and shaping to it, and pretty happy with that. So now I can move forward. So I got a good starting point for my frame. So I've got the neck tube into the frame jig, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to center the fork stop. So I clamped 2 pieces of angle iron to this part of the jig, And then I can measure between these and the stop on each side till it's perfectly even, and then lock down the lock nut, and then that should be done. Makes it a lot easier than just trying to eyeball it and being way off. So I'm bending the lower frame rails, putting the first bend in them. I definitely need a better bender. This one barely does what I need it to do. And I'm very limited as to what material I can work with. So I've made a reference line on here with a marker so that I can take a ruler and actually measure how much I'm bending. I tried to measure the angles and stuff, and it just made it hard to replicate bends. So I know that previously around 3 7/16 got me to the bend that I needed. So I just put a ruler in here, rest it on the cylinder, and then that's my mark there. So right now at 0 bend, I'm at about 1 inch. It's 3 1/4. So I'm gonna take it out and check, see what it looks like. Sometimes you have to take count. It's when you let the pressure off, it springs back a little bit. The big downfall is the degree that I'm bending, it starts to flatten out the tube in the bend. But the way I build these mini bikes, I end up having a bunch of reinforcement in this area anyway with the motor mount. So I'm not too concerned about it, but for other things, it's definitely an issue. So I forgot to do it the first time, and that I marked the center line of the bend before I take it out, so that when I put it back in, it's lined up where it was originally. Yeah. And that looks good. That was at 3 7/16. So then by measuring that, I can just go ahead and bend this one right to the same, and it'll be the same bend. Got the first bends made in both the lower frame rails. So the next step will be to coat these ends to fit the neck. Then after I do that, I'll have to put another bend here to bring these up to match the axle blocks. I think I'm going to end this video at this point. I'm going to try and be conscious of this series and not make each video super long. I'm trying to be as detailed as possible, but I do know that it becomes an issue when the videos are crazy long that people don't watch them. So thanks for watching.